I'm Nathan Schreiber. I'm the creator of Science Ninjas, and you're listening to the True North Country Comics podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book and graphic novel creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. If you want to drop me a line, you can contact me at john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. On this episode, I chat with Nathan Schreiber about his Science Ninjas graphic novels and more at the 2022 Toronto Comic Arts Festival. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. It's also available on the True North Country Comics channel on YouTube. I invite you to like and subscribe. Currently residing in London, Ontario, Nathan has been drawing comics his whole life. His indie comic Power Out won a Xeric Award in 2009 and was nominated for an Eisner in 2010. He illustrated the New York Times #1 best-selling graphic novel Healthcare Reform in 2011. In 2019, he published the first Science Ninjas graphic novel, Big Trouble with Simple Machines, followed by the first book in the Valence Chemistry trilogy in 2021, described as a mix of shonen mania and hard science. And so, without further ado, here's my chat with Nathan Schreiber about his Science Ninjas graphic novels and more at the 2022 Toronto Comic Arts Festival. So Nathan Schreiber, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Oh, thanks for taking the time to talk to me.
I appreciate your time. Before we get started, I wanted to ask you, what was the first comic book that you read?
The first comic I ever read it was interesting. It wasn't a comic book, strictly speaking. It was a book about Spider-Man, but it had two comics in it. And one was, I think it's Amazing Fantasy 15, the first appearance of Spider-Man. So it's like a Ditko comic. And then there was like Amazing Spider-Man. I don't know the number. Oh, I really should know this. It's like 86, I think. But it's a John Romita Sr. artwork, and that one in particular, like, I don't know, like I must have reread that comic like 100 times. There's something about the way, it's just, I don't know, it just all seems so glamorous, which is kind of a funny way to describe Spider-Man, but that just really attracted me as a kid. Just like this big adventure, he's swinging through the city, he has this, Gwen Stacy is beautiful and she's calling him up, and I was like, I don't know, I was like 7 or something, and I was like, oh, I want to be Spider-Man when I grow up.
Sure, absolutely. That's great inspirations for sure, but I'm wondering who or what inspires you to create today?
It's interesting. The stuff that really inspires me today, I mean, there's all these sort of like legendary artists that I look up to, like Tezuka is a really big inspiration for me. But like when you're talking about like today, it's really like the artists that I see on TikTok. I'm like, I really like TikTok a lot. It's just a lot of fun, and there's so many artists on there doing really amazing things. And like, there's this artist in particular that is really inspiring to me. Name is Yoshi Tani, and she is just like an absolute maestro with color. And because she's a saint, she also posts all these tutorials about how she picks her color palettes and stuff like that. She just got nominated for an Eisner, I think, for cover design. But cool. She's just like incredible. And it's like you see all of these like, just legendary people on TikTok, and they're making just really amazing artwork. And you can kind of just like sort of look under the hood, see how they're doing that, and get these great tips. But there's also like, artists that like, their skill levels aren't really on that level yet, but they're like posting every single day. They're doing stuff, and they're improving like very rapidly. And that is also really inspiring too. And I swear, it's like, this will sound like corny, but it's like you can take a look at, or at least, you know what, I wouldn't say the quality of my art, but my satisfaction with my art has improved dramatically ever since I've started really following these people on TikTok. So I would suggest a lot of comic artists to just get on there and just see what people are doing.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, it's very popular, that's for sure. So we're talking because you're an exhibitor at the Toronto Comic Arts Festival for this year. So with that in mind, do you have any favorite convention moments from the past that you can share?
Oh, I love going to conventions. It's just so exciting thinking about going to a convention, right? Like, I used to go to tons of conventions. I'm a little bit different, like as I'm sure when we get to sort of the content of the comics that I do. So I do go to comic festivals a lot, and I love MoCA was like one that I have really, really fond memories of, and going there and tabling with people and just going to the show. Like it's just like the right size. Like I find there's just like really amazing artists there. There's great workshops. So I really love MoCA, but like there's a couple, like I go to science teacher conferences too. And those are really interesting because I am like a particularly shiny object at those conventions. Like there's a lot of people selling curriculum and different things like that. But then it's like, oh, there's this comic book artist at this science teacher conference. So I'm like a pretty unique proposition there. And I also go to homeschool conventions too. Those are a whole different thing. Like I'm definitely a lot different than a lot of the vendors there as well. So it's kind of fun to go to those. Like I like going to the comic conventions to sort of see what everybody's doing, but in some ways I kind of like I get to kind of be the belle of the ball at these other conventions, which is really fun. Like I'm going to go to TCAF and I'm so excited. I'm going to meet all these cartoonists and meet all these people, but I'm really just going to be any other comic artist like anybody else there. And I'm looking forward to that. It's my first time going. I'm like
cool.
really, really excited.
Yeah. So speaking of what you'll be showcasing, can you tell me what you'll have on your table there at this year's TCAF?
Yeah, I'm going to have my first two Science Ninjas graphic novels, and I'm really hoping that I can crank out like a mini of because I have the next I'm working on a series. It's called the Chemistry Trilogy of graphic novels. So I make graphic novels that they're like shonen manga, like ninja, like really, really kind of like that. Something you'd find in like Shonen Jump.
Oh, wow.
Like that. But it teaches chemistry. So it has characters, it has a story, it has mystery, there's romance, there's action. But, it's also in the context of like the world's most dangerous chemistry tournament. And the competitors are competing, they're competing with each other to try to become a science ninja. These are all cadets at Newton Academy. And they want to become science ninjas, which are like these sort of soldier scientists that run this futuristic society. And so they have to compete in this chemistry tournament. So they have to know real chemistry in order to extricate themselves from all of the different dangerous situations that they find themselves in. So it's a 3-book series, and I released the first book in 2019, and I'm working on the next book now. It's probably going to be, a little bit later than 2019. Sorry, 2021, I think it came out. The next one's coming out next year. I'm going to have the first chapter of that book, I think, available as like a mini. I'm going to have something. I'm going to have something new there because, I'm going to TCAF. I got to debut a book, right?
Sure, yeah.
So this one's going to be like the big test that they're going through, and I'm really excited. I still got like one more page, but the thing that's so annoying is that then you start wrapping something up, and then you notice all the little things, and you're like, oh wait, I gotta go back and fix that. Like, oh no, the colors on that page look terrible. But something. So I think a lot of comic artists can probably relate to this. Is like when you get to the end of your book, you have actually improved a lot by the time you've gotten to the end of the book, and then you look at those first few pages, and you're like, oh no, like what was I thinking here? Like I got to redo all this, or maybe even like. I realized I have this character's hairstyle, and it just looked like I just did these lines to draw this elaborate ponytail, and I just don't really draw this character that much. She's like a new character in my series, and now I'm realizing, oh, she's everywhere. And when I turn her around from the back, like the hair looks really strange, so I have to completely, it's just anyway, getting too far into the reeds here. It's like just trying to like really hustle and wrap up this like 32-page mini that I can have on offer at the convention. But I'm just going to be, I can go there and not sell anything at all. And if you come to my table, I'll be thrilled to talk to you. I'm just so excited about this show.
Well, it sounds like it, that's for sure. Well, want to get a little bit deeper though into why you made this story and these books. And I guess the next question would be, did you see a need for some different type of way of teaching science in schools or in education in general?
Well, I was reading a lot of Naruto in 2010, and it was a little bit of a low point in my life. Like I was living with my sister, my job prospects were pretty dim, and I found a lot of inspiration especially in those early volumes of Naruto. It's really about him sort of claiming his identity. It's like, of course, every one of these manga is a story about some kid who becomes obviously the most powerful character in the whole universe, and they can blow up planets and do whatever. But Naruto starts off and he's just really he's just really sort of like defending his own kind of pride, and he's, you know, kind of a second-rate guy in a lot of ways, and there was just something that really resonated that. So that was really on my mind. And I don't know, I come up with like 100 ideas a day, and, you know, 99.9% of them are absolutely garbage. But like, I had this idea. I was like, oh, what if you just had like ninjas like Naruto, and they were wearing like lab coats? And just like any idea, what happens is I have this little idea, and then I start flipping it over in my head. It's like, oh, and I could do that, and I could do that. And I just sort of realized, I was like, oh, like, you know, I'm an engineer. So I studied computer science and engineering, and, you know, and took science classes, took physics, chemistry. And I was just like, you know, I'd probably be pretty good at doing, you know, like this seems like kind of like a weird thing, like something new, something different. Like, what if you had like a shonen manga like Naruto, but it taught you chemistry? And there's something that's so engrossing, I find, about, you know, those storylines where there's a character that's growing and there's kind of like a saga. Like, you just want to keep reading the whole thing, and they're pretty long stories. And I was like, well, what you could do is you could make a whole science curriculum, and, you know, somebody would want to read it if they're interested in science, but they might just want to read it because they're interested in the characters. And then they would, you know, you could learn so much. Okay, like magic systems in books and things like that. Think about how complex these things are. And we learn all of these different rules for how like the magic works. And, you know, like, what is it, like Witcher? It's like they cast a spell and then they get older, or they lose blood or something like that. You know, there's all these sort of systems like that. But like the whole universe runs on these systems, you know, like electromagnetism, gravity. You know, there are systems that are already in place, and they can, you know, be utilized for drama, just like these magic systems are in stories. And I was just really thinking about that, and it was just like, oh, this is like a really good idea. I just really got to just like keep making this. And you know, and I put some comics on my website. I made a game that's actually quite successful. It's a game that sort of teaches 7-year-olds chemistry in addition. And it features the characters that are in this book as well. But it was just like, yeah, it was just something that I felt like, oh, I think only I can do this. Or not, I shouldn't say only I can do this. That's like, that sounds like something Kanye would say. But like, you know, like, this is something I'm sort of uniquely qualified to do. I can make comics that explain stuff. And I made a comic that explained the healthcare bill. I made some comics for FEMA in the United States. That's the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And, you know, they just sort of, these comics sort of like existed online to help kids navigate like natural disasters. It was kind of like a game. And it was like, oh, I can make comics that explain things. So I can make these comics that explain science. And, you know, and I can do it in this sort of like fun, like shonen manga kind of way. And it just seemed like, oh, this is like something new and fresh that, yeah, like I said, it's like, I don't know, what's Jill Gerber once told me, it's like, oh yeah, there's nobody that's really doing what you're doing. And I think that's the reason too. Like, I've tried to get this published a couple times, and a lot of people tell me like, oh, there's, you know, it's too ninja for the science crowd. It's too science for the ninja crowd. But I've come to peace with the fact that it's like, you know what, if I just have to publish all these books myself, that's fine. And it'll probably go a lot faster if I do it myself anyway.
Well, I'm sure that, I mean, the audience for this is built in, so to speak, right? Over time, we've seen comic books being accepted as an educational tool.
Absolutely,
I've talked to a lot of educators, and they're saying, yeah, I'm using that, you know, and certainly there's a lot of historical things that have sort of come along. We've seen Brad Meltzer do his, who am I type of books and historical figures. Yeah. And certainly libraries now, even in schools, have accepted graphic novels, Bone, for example. These sorts of things. Yeah. You know, so I guess what I'm trying to get at is you're seeing the acceptance of comic books as an educational tool to reach your goal to get science in there. I guess you're seeing this as a great opportunity for you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's just like there's just a different generation of teacher out there too that's like very comfortable with the idea that this is something that is, you know, it's like this is helpful content. You know, this is, you know, comic books are something that you want in a classroom. And I always thought that it would be a great way to get sort of reluctant learners on board. You know, like, that's always been part of sort of like my strategy is like, it's easy to get kids that are really into science comics, you know? And I love those kids. I was one of those kids. But then there's just probably some other kid that just really likes Dragon Ball, but they might take to the comic and learn a whole lot too.
Sure. Now, you mentioned that you've gone to conventions primarily that focus on education curriculum. So with that in mind, are your books actually being read in schools today as part of the science curriculum?
Yeah, but it's in really just a few places. Like the games are used in quite a few schools. The books are used in a few schools. Actually, homeschoolers actually are really big fans of my product. So I get a lot of letters too from kids that are homeschooled and they read my books and they tell me their theories on the characters and stuff like that. And they show me like the levers and stuff that they build because one of my graphic novels is called Big Trouble with Simple Machines, and it's like the characters are trapped in this dungeon with 6 different levels and they need to use a different simple machine to get out of it. And there's these exercises in the back of the book about like, oh, build your own simple machines. And a lot of the kids like show me like photos and stuff of the simple machines they make. So homeschoolers are using it a lot more than teachers. It's like something that I'm actually going to the National Science Teachers Conference in Chicago this summer to hopefully network with a lot of teachers and find out like how can we get these books in the school. I mean, honestly, that's how I've been meeting a lot of science teachers throughout my career. And that was more when I had the games. Like now I have these graphic novels. Like I've always made the comics, but I put them on my website. The actual graphic novels, though, are pretty recent development. But the thing is, like, there's been COVID, so I haven't really been able to meet.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to meet science teachers. I'm really hoping to meet teachers and see, like, oh, how can we get this? Like, I always imagined it would be perfect for like summer reading.
Mm-hmm.
You could read like this set of chemistry graphic novels before your chemistry class in the fall, and that'd be a really fun summer reading assignment to read like a series of graphic novels about like chemistry tournament.
Well, I want to switch gears a wee bit and talk about the tools used to create your art. Can you walk me through your workflow?
Oh, sure. So something I'd recommend to anybody, I hope he's still doing this, but Frank Santoro has this like amazing comics workshop, and it's correspondence. So, you don't have to live in Pittsburgh, which I think is where Santoro's at, to take the course. And man, like, this is always like, it's something that I think is really interesting is when people either have a course or a book or something like that, and they will give you very specific direction that is very, I would even go as far as to say is like idiosyncratic. Like I feel like there's a lot of like generalists and they're teaching you and they want to make sure like, oh, I don't want to like, like I want to, work really hard and like, like pursue your goals. And, this very, very general advice. And like Frank isn't like that. Frank is like, okay, I want you to do exactly this. I want you to make 30 of these. I want you to draw a circle this way and just do it. It might sound crazy, but just do it. Like he has a very particular way that he envisions making comics, and he teaches you every little aspect of that. And I didn't incorporate absolutely everything that he did, but one thing that was just great is he has this great method of starting a story. And this is how I start every single comic story I do now. You just take a stack of index cards and you time yourself. You give yourself like 30 minutes or something like that. And you just draw scenes from the story. And they don't have to be in order or anything like that. But you just draw as many as you can get out of your head. And then you take those index cards and then you arrange them in chronological order. And then you take a look and you're like, okay, well, to get from here, to here to the next one, you need to have a few more cards. So it sort of gives you this idea of like how to arrange the images to create the story. And I still think it's the best. It's sort of like the best way to get started on a comic. So that's how I'll start. And I'll just have shoe boxes full of index cards when I'm making new graphic novels. And from there, it's like I'll assemble like a rough comic or something like that. And I do all this digitally. So the index cards are obviously all by hand. But after that, I'm basically doing everything digitally. I scan everything in. I make like a rough thumbnail version of the comic, and then I'm doing it all in like Clip Studio, which I think is like a really, if you're a young comic artist or something like that, Clips is so great. I mean, it has so many tools, but it's also really affordable. Because like you can get that monthly subscription or whatever to Adobe. That is like if you're just like starting out, man. Like, I mean, even if you're not just starting out, that is like a really serious part of your budget now. So I would really highly recommend Clips, and it's just really, it's like, it's built for making comics. So it has so many great comics specific tools for making like word balloons, for doing sort of like screen tones. Like you can make really cool looking screen tones with Clips very easily. So that's what I'm doing basically everything in now. I'm doing it in Clips. I do one pass of kind of like polished roughs, and then I I ink it, and then I color it. And then I edit it, unfortunately. And I keep on editing it, and I keep on editing it. Man, it's tough. I started doing this thing actually where I put like a little square of cardboard, and I sort of put it over my Z key on the keyboard, so that particularly when I'm doing roughs or when I'm warming up, I don't press Control Z, because man, that is just like something I do way too much. And sometimes like it's a gift and a curse, I think, when you're working digitally, is that you can keep on sort of like undoing, and it's like, you can't really do that on paper because you'll just bore through the paper with your eraser.
Right.
And there's something that just feels very I don't know. I always feel like a sucker when I'm using an actual eraser. I'm like, oh, I messed up, like, okay. Whereas like Control Z feels like it doesn't cost anything, but like, man, it's like, that's one thing in a lot of ways, I really prefer working on paper. I think it's just like, like in particular, just like the quality of the lines that I get, and, just the tactile feel of everything. It's so much better. But I weigh that against like, all the time saving functions of working digitally. Like I have a couple kids, like I don't have time I got to do this as fast as I can. And digitally is really the way to go for that.
Sure. Now, you've hinted that you've got some more books on the way, but wondering, do you have any up and coming projects that you can talk about?
So I'm working on the second book in the chemistry trilogy right now. And like I said, I'm going to have like a sort of preview of that for TCAF. I'm going to kickstart that in February. And then I'm hoping to kickstart the last book in that 3-part series in February of, what would that be? I guess 2024. And then I'm going to take like a little break, probably not a long break, but there's a game I'm working on. So I make comics, but I also make games, and I'm working on a circuit game, actually. It's pretty cool stuff. Cooperative game. You're building a circuit together, and like any good cooperative game, there's like, you got to wire these lights, and there's the red lights you have to wire, but then for every turn you don't wire the red lights, you also you get more yellow lights, and they sort of multiply. So I don't know if you ever played a cooperative game. There's sort of a structure to them where it's like, okay, you have an objective, and you want to race towards that objective, but then there's these fires, and you got to put out the fires, or there's going to be more fires that you got to put out. So I gotta wrap up that game after I finish these graphic novels, and after that, I have plans for at least 9 more Science Ninjas graphic novels.
Wow.
Like, am I going to get a chance to make them all? I hope so.
Yeah.
That'd be really great. Like, I want to do earth science. I want to do energy and power. I want to do space, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I have tons of ideas for these books, and it's a fun setting, and I love the characters too. It's it's in some ways it's kind of difficult to do science graphic novels because like the characters are the main characters are these gen mods. They're superheroes. They're super strong. Well, they're super strong because their muscles are made out of earth metals. Like, you got to come up with kind of plausible situations that still work. Everything has to take place on Earth, because then all of these, you know what I mean? It's like, like a character like Superman can't exist in my world, because how could Superman fly? Like, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense that Spider-Man is so strong. Like, why is he so strong? He's not very heavy. That doesn't make any sense. So, it's kind of an interesting constraint to work with, to come up with a sort of science fiction story, but there's nothing supernatural that happens in it,
Mm-hmm.
or there's no sort of like hand waving science explanations and stuff like that. It's like everything has got to at least seem plausible. So it's a challenge to work with, but it's a world that I really have a lot of fun with.
Yeah, sounds like it for sure. Now, you hinted at some other conventions you'll be attending really soon. Do you have any festivals that you have on your map that you'll be going to later this year?
Well, I think I told you I'm going to go to the National Science Teachers Conference in Chicago. That's I think it's in the end of July. I'm really looking forward to that too, just because it's going to be my first time back in Chicago, and it's going to be my wife is coming with me, and it's going to be our first vacation without the kids since before the pandemic, certainly. So a long while since then. So that's going to be fun. There's a comic convention in London, Ontario, which is where I live, and I'm really looking forward to that too, just so I can meet the people in my town that make comics and like comics. I moved here a couple months before the pandemic started, so I really didn't get a chance to meet many of my neighbors. So I'm pretty excited about that, and I'll be looking at some other conventions too. I'm pretty interested in the Motor City Comic Con, but I think I might have missed that already. It's tough getting to cons. I think I mentioned like I have 2 young kids,
Yeah.
so that's always like a very big negotiation, with my family and my in-laws. They live in Hamilton. So conventions are, I think they're so much fun, but yeah, they're definitely something that I got to like that's why like the London one will be great because like, my daughter might even just be able to hang out with me in the booth most of the time.
Sure. Yeah, sounds good. So it sounds like you've got a lot on the go between books and conventions and festivals. So do you have a website where you recommend people go to find out more about your current and your future projects?
Yeah, go to scienceninjas.com. It's spelled exactly like it sounds, scienceninjas.com. If you want to like see what I'm doing kind of on like a day-to-day basis, you can just find me on TikTok. I'd say is like the best, like that's the best like social media platform. Like I post to that like pretty regularly, and you can sort of see like all of my videos are kind of about like my working process and stuff like that. So you get like a really close look at what I'm working on a day-to-day basis.
Thanks to Nathan for the chat. You can discover more about Science Ninjas on Twitter at science_ninjas and on Instagram at Science Ninjas and online at scienceninjas.com. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts. And please leave a good rating. Also check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website and follow along on Twitter at True North Comics. True North Country Comics is on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to the video channel and hit the notification button. Please send your feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2022.